"You look beautiful, Isabella," I managed, the words feeling like sandpaper in my throat. It was true. Even knowing what was coming, I couldn't deny her striking beauty. Isabella Rossi Hayes was a masterpiece sculpted from ambition and Italian marble. Tonight, she wore a dress the color of midnight, a stark contrast to her fiery red hair, which was swept up in an elaborate chignon that probably took 3 hours and a team of stylists to achieve. Diamonds, the size of small planets, glittered at her ears and throat, gifts from her father, the notorious shipping magnate, Alessandro Rossi. "Thank you, Arthur," she replied, her voice cool and smooth, like the surface of a frozen lake. There was no warmth there, no affection. Just a chilling politeness that had become the soundtrack of our marriage over the last— well, I couldn't even pinpoint when it had started to unravel. The waiter, a man who seemed to have perfected the art of being both present and invisible, arrived with our appetizers. Oysters Rockefeller for her, escargots for me. Ironic, I thought. Escargots. Slow, agonizing progress towards a predetermined and likely unpleasant end. "Father sends his regards," Isabella said, delicately spearing an oyster. "He's disappointed he couldn't be here." Disappointed? Alessandro Rossi was probably thrilled. He'd never approved of me. A lowly architect, I was, in his eyes, beneath his daughter, beneath the Rossi empire. He'd made his displeasure abundantly clear from the moment Isabella had introduced me, 7 years ago, as her fiancé. He'd seen me as a gold digger, a social climber, someone trying to infiltrate his family's wealth and power. He'd been wrong about my intentions, but perhaps, in a twisted way, he'd been right about the outcome. "Tell him I said hello," I replied, the words tasting like bile. I hated the charade, the forced pleasantries, the pretense of civility. I wanted to scream, to rage, to shatter the delicate crystal and expose the ugly truth beneath the polished veneer of our lives. But I didn't. I played my part, as I had for years, the dutiful, accommodating husband, the puppet dancing on Alessandro Rossi's strings. "He's concerned about the situation," Isabella continued, her eyes, the color of jade, locking onto mine. There was a flicker of something there. Amusement? Contempt? I couldn't tell. "The situation?" I asked, feigning ignorance. "The delicate matter we're here to discuss," she said, emphasizing the word delicate with a chilling smile. "Ah, yes," I said, reaching into my breast pocket. "That." I pulled out the envelope, thicker than the one in my previous attempt at this story, because this time it wasn't just divorce papers. It was a declaration of war. I placed it on the table between us. The heavy cream paper, embossed with the logo of my newly retained lawyer. Patricia Sterling, Esquire, a woman known for her ruthlessness and her impeccable win record. Sterling was a shark, and I needed a shark. Because Isabella, I knew, wouldn't be playing fair. Isabella didn't touch the envelope. She simply stared at it, her expression unreadable. The silence stretched, punctuated only by the soft murmur of other diners and the clinking of silverware. "Divorce papers, Arthur?" she finally asked, her voice deceptively calm. "On our anniversary? How cliched?" "It seemed fitting," I said, my voice tight. "A symbolic end to a symbolic marriage." She laughed, a low, throaty sound that sent a shiver down my spine. "You think this is symbolic, Arthur? You think this is just about us?" "What else could it be about?" I asked, frowning. She leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "Everything, Arthur. Everything." And that's when the evening, already destined for disaster, took a sharp turn into the truly bizarre. Before I could respond, a commotion erupted near the entrance of the restaurant. Shouts, screams, the shattering of glass. I turned, along with everyone else in the room, to see what was happening. 3 men, dressed in black, their faces masked, stormed into the restaurant, brandishing weapons. Not guns, surprisingly, but swords. Long, gleaming, wickedly sharp swords. "Nobody move!" one of them yelled, his voice muffled by the mask. "This is a— He hesitated, clearly flustered. "A robbery?" Another one supplied helpfully. "Yes, a robbery! Everyone on the floor!" Chaos erupted. Diners screamed and scrambled under tables. Waiters dropped trays of food, the air filled with the sounds of panic and fear. But Isabella didn't move. She remained seated, perfectly calm, her eyes fixed on the masked men with an expression of— was that boredom? "Isabella!" I hissed, grabbing her arm. "Get down!" She shook off my hand, her gaze unwavering. "Don't be ridiculous, Arthur," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They're not here for us." "What are you talking about?" I asked, incredulous. "They're robbing the restaurant." "No, they're not," she said, a strange smile playing on her lips. "They're here for a delivery?" And then, to my utter astonishment, one of the masked men, the one who seemed to be in charge, walked directly towards our table. He stopped in front of Isabella, bowed slightly, and presented her with a small, velvet box. Isabella took the box, opened it, and examined its contents. Inside, nestled on a bed of black satin, was a single, flawless black pearl, the size of a robin's egg. "The serpent's eye," she murmured, her voice filled with a strange mixture of awe and satisfaction. "It's beautiful." I stared at her, speechless. What in the world was going on? "Who are these men, Isabella?" I asked, my voice a hoarse whisper. "What is that pearl?" She closed the box, snapping it shut with a decisive click. "Questions, questions, Arthur," she said, shaking her head. "You always ask so many questions." She stood up, smoothing down her dress. "Gentlemen," she said, addressing the masked men, her voice now clear and commanding. "Thank you for your services." The men bowed again, then, as quickly and silently as they had arrived, they disappeared back out into the night. The restaurant was in a state of pandemonium. People were crying, shouting, calling the police. But Isabella was completely unfazed. She calmly sat back down, picked up her champagne glass, and took a sip. "Now," she said, turning to me, her eyes glittering. "Where were we?" "Ah, yes, divorce papers." I stared at her, my mind reeling. This was insane. This was beyond anything I could have imagined. "Isabella," I said, struggling to find my voice. What just happened?" She smiled. A slow, sly smile that sent a chill down my spine. "Let's just say, Arthur," she said, her voice low and conspiratorial, "that our marriage was about a lot more than just love. Or lack thereof. And that's when I realized. I had no idea who I had married. And I had no idea what I had just gotten myself into. This wasn't just a divorce. This was something much bigger, much more dangerous. And that black pearl, the serpent's eye, was somehow at the center of it all. The next few days were a whirlwind of confusion and fear. I tried to go back to my normal life, to focus on my work, but it was impossible. The image of those masked men, the black pearl, Isabella's chilling smile, it haunted my every waking moment. I tried to talk to Sarah, my lawyer, about it, but I didn't know where to begin. How could I explain something that I didn't even understand myself? "Sarah," I said, during one of our meetings, "something strange happened at the restaurant, the night I served Isabella with the divorce papers." Sarah looked at me, her expression concerned. What happened, Edward? I hesitated, feeling ridiculous. There were men with swords. They gave Isabella a pearl, a black pearl. Sarah stared at me, her eyebrows raised. Swords? Like actual swords? Yes, I said, nodding. And Isabella, she seemed to know them. She called the pearl the serpent's eye. Sarah leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. The serpent's eye, she repeated, her voice low. I've heard of it. It's a legend. A mythical pearl, said to be worth a fortune, and said to be cursed. Cursed? This was getting weirder and weirder. Cursed? I asked, my voice a mixture of disbelief and apprehension. According to the legend, Sarah said, the serpent's eye brings misfortune and ruin to anyone who possesses it. It's been linked to all sorts of unpleasant events throughout history. Shipwrecks, assassinations, wars. So it's just a story, I said, trying to sound dismissive, but a knot of unease was tightening in my stomach. Maybe, Sarah said, shrugging, but legends often have a basis in truth. And given what you've told me about Isabella and her family. She didn't need to finish the sentence. I knew what she was implying. The Rossi family, with their vast wealth, their shadowy connections, their ruthless ambition, and it wasn't hard to imagine them being involved in something illicit. Something dangerous. I need to find out more about this pearl, I said, my voice determined, and about those men. Be careful, Edward, Sarah warned me. If the serpent's eye is real, and if Isabella is involved, you could be in danger. I knew she was right, but I couldn't back down. I had to know the truth. I had to understand what was going on, what role Isabella played in all of this, and what it all had to do with our marriage. My investigation started with the internet, a deep dive into the murky world of black pearls, ancient legends, and historical conspiracies. I spent hours poring over articles, websites, and forums, searching for any mention of the serpent's eye. I discovered that the legend of the pearl dated back centuries, to a remote island in the South Pacific. According to the legend, the pearl was discovered by a young pearl diver who was immediately captivated by its beauty and power. But the pearl brought him nothing but misfortune. He lost his family, his friends, his fortune, and eventually, his life. The pearl then passed through the hands of various rulers, merchants, and pirates, each one meeting a tragic end. It was said to be cursed, a bringer of chaos and destruction. The more I read, the more convinced I became that the serpent's eye was more than just a legend. There were too many historical accounts, too many coincidences, too many deaths. I also started looking into Isabella's family, the Rossi Empire. I knew they were wealthy and powerful, but I had never really delved into the details of their business dealings. What I found was disturbing. The Rossi family had a long and complex history, stretching back centuries to the days of the Italian Renaissance. They had amassed their fortune through shipping, trade, and other less savory activities. There were rumors of smuggling, piracy, even involvement in organized crime. And there were whispers, faint but persistent, linking the Rossi family to the serpent's eye. Whispers of a secret society, a shadowy organization that controlled the pearl and used its power for their own nefarious purposes. The more I learned, the more I realized that my marriage to Isabella had been a sham, a carefully orchestrated plan to what? To gain access to my family's connections? To use me as a pawn in some larger game? I needed to talk to someone who knew more about the Rossi family than I did, someone who could help me understand what was going on. I decided to contact my uncle, Robert, my father's estranged brother. Robert had been a journalist an investigative reporter who had spent years researching the Rossi family. He had been obsessed with them, convinced that they were involved in all sorts of criminal activities. My father had always dismissed Robert as a conspiracy theorist, a paranoid crank. But now I wasn't so sure. I found Robert living in a small, secluded cabin in the mountains, far away from the city and the Rossi's influence. He was old, frail, but his eyes still burned with that same fierce intensity I remembered from my childhood. "Uncle Robert," I said, after I had explained everything, "do you know anything about the Serpent's Eye?" Robert looked at me, his expression grave. "The Serpent's Eye," he repeated, his voice a hoarse whisper. "So it's real." "You know about it?" I asked, my heart pounding. "I've been researching it for years," he said, nodding. "It's the key, Edward. The key to understanding the Rossi family, their power, their evil." He told me everything he knew. About the legend of the pearl, about the secret society that guarded it, about the Rossi family's long and bloody history. "The Rossi family," he said, "they believe the Serpent's Eye gives them power. Power over others, power over events. They use it to control, to manipulate, to destroy." "But why?" I asked. "Why would they do that?" "Greed, Edward," Robert said, his voice bitter. "Power. It's always the same. They want to control everything, to be the masters of their own destiny, and they don't care who they hurt in the process." "And Isabella?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "What is her role in all of this?" Robert looked at me, his eyes filled with pity. "She's one of them, Edward," he said. "She's been raised to be one of them. She's as ruthless, as ambitious, as dangerous as any of them." His words hit me like a physical blow. I had known, deep down, that Isabella was capable of great cruelty, but to hear it confirmed, to hear that she was part of something so dark, so evil, it was devastating. "What do I do, Uncle Robert?" I asked, feeling lost and overwhelmed. "You fight, Edward," he said, his voice firm. "You fight them, you expose them, you bring them down." "But how?" I asked. "They're too powerful. They have too much influence." "You have something they don't have, Edward," Robert said, his eyes gleaming. "You have the truth, and the truth, when wielded correctly, is the most powerful weapon of all." He gave me a box, a small wooden box filled with documents, photographs, and recordings. "This is everything I've gathered over the years," he said. "It's not much, but it's a start. Use it, Edward. Use it to expose them, to bring them to justice." I took the box, feeling its weight in my hands. It was more than just a box. It was a weapon I could use to fight back, to protect myself, and to finally, truly be free. I left Robert's cabin, feeling a renewed sense of purpose, a determination to uncover the truth and to bring the Rossi family to justice. But I also knew that I was walking into a dangerous game, a game with stakes far higher than I could have ever imagined. I was up against a powerful, ruthless family, a family with a long history of violence and corruption. But I wasn't alone. I had Sarah, my lawyer, my friend, my love. And I had the truth. And that, I believed, was enough. The dinner date that had started it all seemed like a distant, faded memory. The real battle was just beginning, and I was ready to fight. The next few months were a blur of activity. I worked closely with Sarah, poring over the documents Robert had given me, piecing together the puzzle of the Rossi family's past and their connection to the Serpent's Eye. We discovered that the Rossi family had been involved in a wide range of criminal activities, from smuggling and money laundering to extortion and even murder. They had used their wealth and influence to corrupt politicians, bribe officials, and silence anyone who dared to oppose them. And the Serpent's Eye, it turned out, was more than just a legend. It was a real, tangible object, a symbol of their power, a tool they used to control and intimidate. We also learned more about the secret society that Robert had mentioned, a shadowy organization known only as the Circle. The Circle was made up of wealthy and influential individuals from around the world, all bound together by a shared belief in the power of the Serpent's Eye and a desire to control the world's resources and political systems. And Isabella, it turned out, was not just a member of the Circle. She was one of its leaders. She was being groomed to take over her father's position, to become the next head of the Rossi family and the custodian of the Serpent's Eye. The more we learned, the more dangerous our task became. We were dealing with powerful, ruthless people who would stop at nothing to protect their secrets. We received threats, anonymous phone calls, veiled warnings. We were followed, our phones were tapped, our computers were hacked. But we didn't back down. We pressed on, driven by a sense of justice, but we didn't back down. We pressed on, driven by a sense of justice and a determination to expose the truth. We knew that we were playing a dangerous game, but we also knew that we couldn't stand idly by while the Rossi family and the Circle continued their reign of terror. We decided to take our findings to the authorities, to the FBI. It was a risky move, knowing the Rossi's influence reached far and wide, but we had no other choice. We needed help, resources, protection. We met with a special agent, a man named David Miller, who headed a task force dedicated to investigating organized crime. Miller was a tough, no-nonsense agent with a reputation for being incorruptible. He listened intently as Sarah and I laid out our evidence, our voices trembling with a mixture of fear and determination. Miller was skeptical at first, dismissing our claims as the ramblings of a disgruntled ex-husband and a conspiracy theorist. But as he examined the documents, the photographs, the recordings, his skepticism slowly turned to grim acceptance. This is bigger than I thought," he said, his voice low. "Much bigger." He agreed to launch an investigation, to look into the Rossi family and the Circle, but he warned us that it would be a long, difficult, and dangerous process. "They're powerful, Mr. Harrison," Miller said, his eyes fixed on mine. "They have connections everywhere. They won't hesitate to use them." "I understand," I said, my voice firm. "But I'm not afraid. I've already lost everything. I have nothing left to lose." The investigation proceeded slowly, meticulously. Agent Miller and his team gathered evidence, interviewed witnesses, and built a case against the Rossi family and the Circle. It was a painstaking process, fraught with obstacles and setbacks. Witnesses disappeared, documents were destroyed, and threats continued to pour in. Isabella, I learned, had become even more powerful since our divorce. She had taken on a more prominent role in the Rossi family business, using her ruthlessness and cunning to expand their empire and consolidate their power. She was a formidable opponent, and I knew she wouldn't hesitate to use any means necessary to stop us. One evening, I received a phone call from an unknown number. "Mr. Harrison," a distorted voice said, "you're playing a dangerous game, a game you can't win." "Who is this?" I asked, my heart pounding. "It doesn't matter," the voice said. "What matters is that you stop. Stop your investigation. Stop digging into things that don't concern you." "Or what?" I challenged, my voice trembling. "Or you'll regret it," the voice said. "You and everyone you care about." The line went dead. I immediately called Sarah and Agent Miller, relaying the threat. They were concerned, but not surprised. "It's a scare tactic, Edward," Sarah said. "They're trying to intimidate you." "It's working," I said, my voice shaking. "We'll increase your security," Agent Miller said. "We'll put you under 24-hour surveillance." But despite the increased security, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread, the sense that I was being watched, followed, hunted. I became paranoid, jumping at every shadow, every unexpected noise. I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat, I couldn't concentrate. And then it happened. One night, as I was driving home from Sarah's office, a black SUV suddenly appeared behind me, tailgating me aggressively. I tried to speed up, to lose them, but they stayed on my tail, their headlights blinding me in my rearview mirror. They rammed my car from behind, sending me spinning out of control. I slammed on the brakes, narrowly avoiding a collision with oncoming traffic. The SUV pulled up alongside me, and I saw a masked figure lean out the window, pointing a gun at me. I braced myself for the impact, for the searing pain of a bullet. But it never came. Instead, another car, a sleek, silver sports car, screeched to a halt between me and the SUV, blocking the shot. The masked figure fired, the bullet shattering the windshield of the silver car. And then, to my utter astonishment, Isabella emerged from the silver car, her red hair blazing in the night, her eyes filled with a fury I had never seen before. "Get out of here!" she yelled at the masked figures. "Leave him alone!" The SUV hesitated for a moment, then sped away, disappearing into the night. Isabella rushed over to my car, her face pale with concern. "Arthur, are you all right?" I stared at her, speechless. Isabella, saving my life? It was unfathomable. What are you doing here?" I finally managed to ask. I couldn't let them hurt you," she said, her voice trembling. "But why?" I asked, still struggling to comprehend what was happening. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a complex mixture of emotions, regret, remorse, and something else. Something that looked like love. "Because I still care about you, Arthur," she said, her voice soft. "Despite everything, I always have." And then she did something that completely shattered my perception of her. She leaned in and kissed me. A deep, passionate, desperate kiss. I was stunned, frozen, unable to respond. Isabella kissing me, after everything that had happened, after everything she had done? She pulled away, her eyes searching mine. "I'm sorry, Arthur," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "I'm so sorry for everything, for the pain I caused you, for the lies, for everything." "Isabella," I said, my voice hoarse. "What's going on? What is this all about?" She took a deep breath, her eyes filled with tears. "It's a long story, Arthur," she said. "A story I should have told you a long time ago." And then she began to tell me the truth. The real truth. About her family, about the circle, about the serpent's eye, and about her role in it all. She told me that she had been raised to be a part of the circle, groomed from birth to take over her father's position. She had been taught to believe in their ideology, in their pursuit of power and control. She had been trained to be ruthless, to be manipulative, to be a monster. But she had never wanted it. She had always hated it, hated the violence, the corruption, the darkness. She had longed for a different life, a normal life, a life filled with love and happiness. And then she had met me. "You were a breath of fresh air, Arthur," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "You were kind and gentle and good. I fell in love with you, truly in love with you. For the first time in my life, I felt hope. Hope for a different future. But her family, the circle, they wouldn't let her go. They saw me as a threat, a weakness. They forced her to choose me or them, and she had chosen them. She had agreed to marry me, to use me, to manipulate me, to ultimately betray me. It was all part of their plan. A plan to gain access to my family's connections, to expand their influence, to solidify their power. The divorce, the lawsuit, it was all orchestrated. A way to discredit me, to destroy me, to remove me as a threat. But something had changed. Seeing me again, seeing the pain she had caused me, seeing the life I had built without her, it had awakened something within her. A conscience, a sense of remorse. "I couldn't do it anymore, Arthur," she said, her voice breaking. "I couldn't live with the lies, the guilt, the darkness. I had to do something. I had to try to make things right." She had been secretly working against the Circle, gathering information, sabotaging their plans, trying to find a way to bring them down. She had been the one who had tipped off Agent Miller, who had provided him with the evidence he needed to launch the investigation. And she had saved my life. She had risked everything to protect me, to save me from the very people she had once served. "I know it's not enough, Arthur," she said, her voice filled with despair. "I know I can never undo the pain I've caused you, but I had to try. I had to atone." I stared at her, my mind reeling. It was all so unbelievable. So much to process, so much to forgive. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked, my voice a mixture of anger and confusion. "I couldn't," she said, shaking her head. "I was afraid of them, afraid of what they would do to me, to you, and I was ashamed of what I had done, of who I had been." I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in years. And I saw, not the cold, calculating woman I had divorced, but the woman I had fallen in love with. The woman who had been trapped, manipulated, and controlled. The woman who had finally found the courage to break free. And I realized I still loved her. Despite everything, despite the pain, the betrayal, the lies, I still loved her. "Isabella," I said, my voice soft. Before I could finish, sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Red and blue lights flashed, illuminating the night. "They're coming," Isabella said, her voice filled with fear. "The Circle. They know. They know I betrayed them." "We have to go," I said, grabbing her hand. "Now!" We ran. We ran as fast as we could, away from the wreckage of our past, towards an uncertain future. We were fugitives, hunted by a powerful, ruthless organization. We had nothing but each other, and the truth. But we also had something else, something the Circle could never understand, could never control. We had love. And that, I knew, was the most powerful weapon of all. The next few weeks were a blur of adrenaline-fueled escapes, close calls, and desperate measures. We moved from safe house to safe house, relying on the help of Sarah and Agent Miller, who were working tirelessly to protect us and to bring down the Circle. We lived on the run, constantly looking over our shoulders, never knowing when or where they would strike. It was terrifying, exhausting, but it was also exhilarating. For the first time in our relationship, Isabella and I were truly a team, working together, fighting for the same goal. We relied on each other, trusted each other, loved each other. We learned more about the Circle, about their operations, their members, their goals. We discovered that they were involved in even more sinister activities than we had initially imagined: human trafficking, arms dealing, political corruption on a global scale. And we learned more about the Serpent's Eye. It wasn't just a symbol of power. It was a key to a vast network of secret accounts, hidden assets, and incriminating information. The Circle believed that whoever possessed the Serpent's Eye controlled the Circle, and they would stop at nothing to get it back. Isabella had hidden the pearl somewhere safe, somewhere only she knew. It was our leverage, our insurance policy, our only hope of bringing them down. One evening, As we were hiding in a small, remote cabin in the mountains, Isabella turned to me, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. "Arthur," she said, her voice low, "I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you a long time ago." "What is it?" I asked, my heart pounding. "The Serpent's Eye. It's not just a key to the Circle's secrets," she said. It's also a key to my family's past, a past that is darker than you can imagine." She told me a story that stretched back generations, a story of betrayal, murder, and a terrible secret that had been passed down through the Rossi family for centuries. The Serpent's Eye, she explained, was not just a pearl. It was a cursed object, a repository of dark energy, a source of immense power and immense evil. The Rossi family had been using the pearl for generations, harnessing its power to amass their fortune, to control their enemies, to achieve their goals. But the pearl had a price. It demanded a sacrifice of blood, of innocence, of love. And Isabella, she revealed, was the next sacrifice. She had been chosen, from birth, to be the next custodian of the Serpent's Eye, to be the next vessel of its power. But she had refused. She had rebelled. She had chosen love over power, freedom over destiny. And that, she said, was why the Circle was hunting us. Not just to retrieve the pearl, but to punish her, to make an example of her, to ensure that no one else ever dared to defy them. "I'm sorry, Arthur," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry for bringing you into this, for putting your life in danger." "Don't be sorry," I said, taking her hands in mine. "You did the right thing. You chose love. You chose freedom, and I'm proud of you." I kissed her. A long, deep, passionate kiss. A kiss that sealed our love, our commitment, our determination to fight, to survive, to win. We knew that we couldn't run forever. We had to confront the Circle, to expose them, to bring them down. We had to end their reign of terror once and for all. With Sarah and Agent Miller's help, we devised a plan. A dangerous plan, a risky plan, but our only hope. We would use the Serpent's Eye as bait. We would lure the Circle into a trap, expose their crimes to the world, and bring them to justice. It was a gamble, a desperate gamble, but we were ready. We were prepared to fight, to risk everything, for our freedom, for our love, for our future. The final confrontation took place at the Rossi family estate, the place where it had all began. The grand, opulent mansion, a symbol of their wealth and power, would become their tomb. We arrived under the cover of darkness, armed with the truth, and a small team of FBI agents led by Agent Miller. Isabella, wearing a wire, would meet with her father, Alessandro Rossi, and the other leaders of the Circle. She would pretend to offer them the Serpent's Eye in exchange for our safety. But it was a trap. As Isabella walked into the mansion, I felt a surge of fear, of dread. I knew the risks, the dangers. I knew that this could be the end. But I also knew that we had to do this. We had to fight. We had to win. I watched, through a hidden camera, as Isabella met with her father. The scene was tense, filled with unspoken threats and veiled accusations. Alessandro Rossi, his face a mask of cold fury, demanded the pearl. Isabella held her ground, refusing to give it to him until he agreed to our terms. The argument escalated, voices rising, tempers flaring. And then it happened. Alessandro Rossi, in a fit of rage, pulled out a gun, pointing it at Isabella. "You dare defy me!" he roared. "You dare betray your family?" "I'm not betraying my family, Father," Isabella said, her voice calm but firm. "I'm saving it from itself." And then she activated the signal. The FBI agents stormed the mansion, weapons drawn. Chaos erupted. Gunfire, shouts, screams. The Circle members, caught off guard, fought back. But they were outnumbered, outgunned. The battle raged throughout the mansion, a violent, chaotic clash between good and evil. I watched, helpless, as Isabella fought alongside the FBI agents, her movements swift and graceful, her determination unwavering. And then I saw him. Alessandro Rossi, his face contorted with rage, his eyes burning with hatred. He was heading towards Isabella, his gun raised. I couldn't let him hurt her. I couldn't let him win. I ran into the mansion, ignoring the shouts of the FBI agents, ignoring the danger. I had to protect her. I had to save her. I found them in the grand ballroom, the scene of so many lavish parties, now a battlefield. Alessandro Rossi had Isabella cornered, his gun pressed against her temple. "Drop your weapon, Rossi!" I yelled, my voice echoing through the room. He turned, his eyes locking onto mine. A slow, cruel smile spread across his face. "You," he sneered. "The lowly architect. The man who dared to steal my daughter." "She was never yours to steal," I said, my voice firm. "She's her own person, and she chose me, she chose love, she chose freedom." "Love?" Rossi laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. "Love is a weakness. Power is everything." He tightened his grip on Isabella, his finger tightening on the trigger. "Let her go, Rossi," I said, my voice pleading. "It's over, you've lost." "I never lose," he said, his eyes blazing with defiance. "And I will never let you have her." He cocked the gun, the click echoing through the room, and then everything happened at once. Isabella, with a sudden, desperate move, elbowed Rossi in the stomach, breaking his grip. I lunged forward, tackling him to the ground. The gun went off, the bullet whizzing past my ear. We struggled, wrestling for control of the weapon. Rossi was strong, desperate, but I was fueled by adrenaline, by love, by a fierce determination to protect the woman I loved. Finally, I managed to wrench the gun from his grasp. I pointed it at him, my hand trembling, my finger on the trigger. I could have killed him. I could have ended it all right there and then. But I didn't. I couldn't. I wasn't a killer. I wasn't like him. I lowered the gun, my body shaking with the aftermath of the adrenaline surge. "It's over, Rossi," I said, my voice hoarse. "It's all over." He stared up at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of hatred and defeat. He knew it was true. He had lost. Everything he had built, everything he had fought for, was gone. The FBI agents rushed in, securing Rossi and the remaining members of the Circle. The battle was over. The war was won. I looked around the room, at the chaos, the destruction, the aftermath of the violent clash. And then I saw her. Isabella. She was standing there, her face pale, her body trembling, but her eyes were filled with relief, with gratitude, and with love. I rushed towards her, embracing her tightly, holding her close. We stood there, in the middle of the ruined ballroom, clinging to each other, the silence broken only by the sound of our ragged breaths. "It's over," I whispered, my voice choked with emotion. "We did it!" "We did it," she repeated, her voice trembling. "Together." We had survived. We had won. We had defeated the Circle, exposed their crimes, and brought them to justice. But more importantly, we had saved each other. We had found our way back to each other, through the darkness, through the pain, through the lies. The weeks that followed were a time of healing, of rebuilding, of recovery. The Rossi Empire crumbled, its assets seized, its leaders imprisoned. The Circle was dismantled, its members scattered, its power broken. The world learned the truth about the Rossi family, about their crimes, about their corruption. It was a scandal that rocked the world, a story that dominated headlines for months. And at the center of it all was Isabella, the woman who had betrayed her family, who had risked everything to do what was right. She was hailed as a hero, a whistleblower, a symbol of courage and integrity. But Isabella didn't care about the accolades, the praise, the fame. All she cared about was us, about our future, about our love. We moved away from the city, away from the shadows of the past, to a small, quiet town by the sea. We bought a modest house with a garden overlooking the ocean. We started a new life, a life filled with peace, with happiness, with love. Isabella gave up her life of luxury and privilege, embracing a simpler, more meaningful existence. She started painting again, her canvases filled with vibrant colors, bold strokes, a reflection of her newfound freedom and joy. Her art, once a mere hobby, became her passion, her therapy, her way of expressing the emotions she had kept bottled up for so long. And I continued to practice law, but I focused on helping those who needed it most, the victims of injustice, the forgotten, the voiceless. I found a purpose in my work, a satisfaction that I had never experienced before. We built a life together, a life based on honesty, trust, and mutual respect, a life free from the lies, the manipulations, the darkness that had consumed us for so long. One evening, as we were sitting on our porch, watching the sunset over the ocean, Isabella turned to me, her eyes filled with a quiet contentment. "Do you ever think about that night?" she asked, her voice soft. "The dinner? The divorce papers?" I smiled, reaching for her hand. "Sometimes," I said, "but not with regret, not anymore." "Me neither," she said, squeezing my hand. "It was the worst night of my life, and the best." "The best?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yes," she said, nodding. "Because it was the night I finally woke up. The night I realized I was living a lie. The night I started to fight for my freedom. And the night I realized how much I truly loved you." I leaned in and kissed her. A long, slow, tender kiss. A kiss that sealed our love, our commitment, our future. "I love you, Isabella," I said, my voice filled with emotion, more than words can say. "I love you too, Arthur," she said, her eyes sparkling. "More than anything." We sat there, in comfortable silence, watching the sun sink below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange, pink, and purple. The air was filled with the scent of salt and sea, the sound of waves crashing against the shore. And as I sat there, holding the woman I loved in my arms, I realized that the romantic dinner date, the one that had ended with divorce papers instead of dessert, had not been the end of our story. It had been the beginning. The beginning of a new chapter, a new life, a new love, a love that had been tested, forged in fire, and emerged stronger, more resilient, more beautiful than ever before. And that, I knew, was a love that would last a lifetime, a love that was worth fighting for, a love that was worth everything. The dinner was a distant, painful memory, a necessary catalyst for a much brighter, much happier future. The divorce papers were just pieces of paper, symbols of a past that no longer defined us. What defined us now was the love we shared, the life we built, and the future we were creating, together. And that, I realized, was the sweetest dessert of all. A life well lived, a love well earned, and a future filled with endless possibilities. And that, I knew, was more than enough. More than I could have ever hoped for. The years continued their relentless march forward, weaving a tapestry of moments, both big and small, that formed the fabric of our lives. Emily grew into a bright, compassionate young woman, inheriting her mother's artistic talent and my stubborn streak. She became a fierce advocate for environmental protection, channeling her passion into meaningful action. Watching her blossom filled me with a pride I couldn't articulate. Sarah and Agent Miller, surprisingly, found love amidst the chaos of our battle against the Circle. Their wedding was a joyous occasion, a testament to the enduring power of hope even in the darkest of times. They remained close friends, a constant source of support and laughter in our lives. Isabella's art continued to flourish. Her paintings, once filled with the vibrant chaos of her inner turmoil, gradually evolved, reflecting the peace and serenity she had found. She became known for her evocative landscapes, capturing the beauty and tranquility of the natural world around us. Her work was displayed in galleries around the world, earning her critical acclaim and a devoted following. But more importantly, it brought her joy, fulfillment, and a sense of purpose. As for me, I continued my work as a lawyer, but my focus shifted. I became increasingly involved in pro bono work, representing victims of corporate greed and government corruption. I found a deep satisfaction in fighting for the underdog, in using my skills to make a difference in the world. The memories of the Circle, of Alessandro Rossi, and of our tumultuous past faded with time, becoming a distant, almost surreal chapter in our lives. We rarely spoke of it, preferring to focus on the present, on the beauty and joy that surrounded us. But sometimes late at night, when the house was quiet and the world was asleep, I would find myself thinking about Claire, about the woman she had been, the woman she could have been. And I would feel a pang of sadness, a sense of loss, not for the life we had shared, but for the life she had never allowed herself to live. One crisp autumn afternoon, years after the dust had settled, I received a package. It was small, unassuming, wrapped in plain brown paper. There was no return address, only my name and address, written in a neat, unfamiliar hand. Curious, I opened the package. Inside, nestled on a bed of cotton wool, was a single object, a black pearl. Not the black pearl, the serpent's eye. That had been secured by the FBI, locked away in a vault, its dark power neutralized. This was a different pearl. Smaller, but equally flawless, equally beautiful, equally haunting. Attached to the pearl was a small, handwritten note. Arthur, this isn't the serpent's eye, but it's a reminder of the darkness we faced and the light we found, a reminder that even from the deepest despair, hope can emerge. I found this pearl on a small island, far away from everything. It reminded me of everything. Of you. Of us. Of the life we could have had. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it, but I wanted you to know. I'm finally at peace. I've found a quiet life, a simple life. I'm happy. Take care of yourself, Arthur, and be happy. You deserve it. See. The note was unsigned, but I knew who it was from. Claire. I held the pearl in my hand, feeling its smooth, cool surface against my skin. It was beautiful, yes, but it also carried a weight, a history, a reminder of a past I could never fully escape. I showed the pearl and the note to Isabella. She read it silently, her expression unreadable. "What will you do with it?" she asked, her voice soft. I looked at the pearl, then at Isabella, at the woman I loved, at the life we had built together. "I don't know," I said honestly. Maybe I'll keep it, as a reminder, not of the darkness, but of the light, of the strength we found, the love we shared, the life we built. A reminder that even from the ashes of a broken marriage, something beautiful can grow. Isabella smiled, a warm, loving smile that reached her eyes. "I think that's a good idea," she said. And so, the black pearl, a symbol of a past filled with pain and betrayal, became a symbol of hope, of resilience, of the enduring power of love. It sat on my desk, a constant reminder of the journey we had taken, the battles we had fought, and the life we had created. A life that was far from perfect, but that was, in its own imperfect way, beautiful. A life that was ours. And that, I realized, was all that mattered. The romantic dinner date, the divorce papers, the chaos, the danger. It had all led us here, to this moment, to this life. And it was, without a doubt, worth it. Every single, agonizing, beautiful moment of it.